the sun comes up on America, across open fields, small towns, and city streets, a new day begins. And here, we rise with it. This is where hard work meets headlines, where truth matters, and America wakes up informed.
An interesting week.
They all are.
This is your country. This is your morning. This is Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. America, let's do it together.
Love you, Ivy.
Love you too.
And it starts right now.
Live from the campus of Hillsdale College in beautiful Hillsdale, Michigan, the epicenter of the political world today as our primary election unfolds. Good morning. I'm Scott Bertram, sitting in for Steve and Ivy here on Daybreak this Tuesday, August 4th of 2026. And here are three big things you need to know. One, it is another big primary election day here in America. Ballots being cast in Michigan, Missouri, Kansas, Virginia, and Washington state. This Democratic U.S. Senate primary in Michigan is the main event pitting the socialist, although he says he's not a socialist, but you can infer things based on his positions and activities. Abdul El-Sayed against Congresswoman Haley Stevens. More on that here in just a minute or two. Two, the massive wildfires in Spokane, Washington are forcing thousands there to evacuate. Officials say more than 700 structures now have been destroyed. The full extent of the damage not yet known. Washington's governor said it is likely the worst natural disaster in the city's history. And number three, Microsoft out with a security warning about hotel Wi-Fi. Company says Russian hackers are using phony sign-in pages to break into accounts. It says the operation's nicknamed Captive Crunch, and it involves a widespread compromise of Wi-Fi networks at hospitality organizations. Experts say if you want to be really safe, use your own hotspot off your mobile device. That's where we start hour one of Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. So glad to be here. Privilege and pleasure, especially on a big day like this, Election Day here in the state of Michigan, where I sit right now. I'm usually one of the first at the precinct to vote. I got to wait till after I'm done. Today, I'm weird. I'm crazy. I think you should vote on Election Day with the full suite of information in front of you. So I wait and I vote. I'll do that later today. But the big deal, the big race is this U.S. Senate primary between Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens. Recent polling says El-Sayed is comfortably ahead. I don't necessarily trust polling at this point, and my guess is you don't either. We'll see what happens when the ballots are counted. El-Sayed is from the extremely progressive socialist wing of the party, endorsed by Bernie, endorsed by AOC. You know all these things. As I talked about yesterday, one of the issues at this point is the socialists and the communists are subverting the Democratic Party from within, using the party's ballot access to get on the ballot to win primaries and then not necessarily be Democrats when they get into office. That's not their plan. Their plan is to be socialists and communists and work for the Democratic Socialists of America. And there was a Democratic congressman on Fox News recently who basically agreed, said, yes, that's exactly what they're doing. That's what Bernie did. Bernie's a quote unquote independent, but he's a socialist. And he uses the Democratic ticket to, run for president when he wants to run for president. But Bernie's a socialist, and these candidates are also socialists. Haley Stevens is asked about this, and this is a problem because Democrats right now don't want to say, you can't be a part of our coalition. The phrase big tent comes up a lot. We're a big tent. We've got people who, just want to tax you 80%. We got people who are socialists too. It's a real big tent here on the Democratic side. Haley Stevens was asked earlier this week by Al Sharpton. I didn't know he still had a show. Al Sharpton on MS Now. Will you endorse and help the socialist El-Sayed if he wins the primary in Michigan? Now, if Haley Stevens were serious about policing her party, and like Bill Maher yesterday saying, this is totally unacceptable, these socialists and communists in our midst who are using the party to gain ballot access, to win races, to govern, she'd say, no, of course not. Haley Stevens, though, says, I'm on the team. I'm going to support whoever wins. Cut 8, Haley Stevens on MS Now.
Can you commit to fully supporting Mr. El Said in the general if he wins this primary, even after everything has been said in this campaign?
You bet. I know of Abdul, recently said that I was the least qualified candidate in the country or something like that. And look, I am on the team, all right, and I'm going to link arms and do what's ever needed. I want to get down there too and help out on, these down ballot races in Michigan. We can flip the House, and I'm going to be standing by our Democratic nominee, whether it's me or my opponent.
That's Sunday. That's Sunday. Haley Stevens saying, "Sure, I'll support the socialist if he wins." Yesterday, Haley Stevens asked, and if my hearing is correct, I believe this question comes from former and future Daybreak guest Camden Mulder from over at National Review. I think that's her asking this question. Will you support not just El Said, but will you support his agenda, his socialist agenda, if he defeats you in this Democratic primary for U.S. Senate? Haley Stevens asked about this yesterday. Cut 15.
National Review.
Hi, Congresswoman. You said that you'll support El Sayed if he wins on Tuesday. Does that include a full endorsement of all his policies and ideas? And if not, which ones do you reject?
Well, look, I'm on the Democratic ticket. I'm on the let's make sure that anyone but Mike Rogers gets to the United States Senate. And look, we still have an election underway. So all the conversations and all the things that are to unfold, after the primary, you're going to see a united Democratic Party. You are going to see us going full force, full-fledged ahead. This has been a spirited effort. And like I said, I've been thrilled to be a part of it. I've had the time of my life.
I'm sure she has. The Democratic Party already is folding itself into a pretzel to try to come to grips with the fact that El Said is, I guess, likely to win today. Polls say he's likely to win. Again, we'll see. I'm not totally convinced because polling hasn't been accurate in the past. But you look at what they're trying to say, what they are saying to, again, try to come to grips with this. Nancy Kaffers, the editorial page editor at the Detroit Free Press, the largest newspaper in the state of Michigan. And yes, I do have the print edition from Sunday. I still go and buy it and read it. Listen to what she wrote on Sunday, trying to square the El Said circle, that he's a socialist and anti-Semitic, but we can't say that because then he's not going to win. She says, El Said is not, as some of his critics have alleged, anti-Semitic. In the same essay, trying to defend him, she says, he's been careless. He's campaigned with anti-Semites like Hassan Piker, who has said Israelis are inbred, and voiced support for Hamas. Just one of his key supporters, but he's not anti-Semitic. He also downplayed the attack on a Jewish school in Michigan. Guy drove a car loaded with gasoline into a Jewish school after losing family in an Israeli airstrike on Gaza. El Said says, hurt people do hurt things. He's not anti-Semitic. He just wants to downplay these terrible attacks against Jewish people in his home state. And by the way, 2 paragraphs down, he certainly hasn't done enough to corral his followers who are raging across the internet with anti-Jewish and anti-Semitic sentiment. So Nancy Kaffers says he's not anti-Semitic. He just campaigns with them. One of his biggest supporters is an anti-Semite. He downplays attacks against Jewish students and Jewish people in his own state, and his supporters are really pretty anti-Semitic. But he himself, he's okay because he's going to be the nominee, and now we all need to support him. We'll find out if that happens later on today. Scott Bertram in for Steve and Ivy here on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy this morning. One for the price of two, as I like to say. You can find me on X at Scott Bertram, SCOTBERTRAM, or scottbertram.com. Here at Hillsdale College, where I serve as the general manager of the award-winning student radio station, WRFH, also a lecturer in journalism and director of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. I host a show called the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, heard on many fine radio stations across the country on the weekend. I host a show called Political Beats over at National Review. Host one called Future of Freedom. Host one called Wasn't That Special? 50 Years of Saturday Night Live. Nothing happening right now in the summer for the most part, but if you want me, you'll find me. All my media doings corralled over at scottbertram.com. Let's head to the Northeast for a minute or two. New Jersey and New York. There's so much happening this week. I thank Steve and Ivy for taking a week off when there was so much news happening. I am not short of topics. This actually was published late last week. I had to hold it because you had to hear this. All the discussion about the SAVE Act and the bigger picture of election integrity. Who's voting? Who's registering to vote? Do you have to show ID? Are there illegal votes being cast? And we on the right are, of course, called crazy and conspiratorial if you think there's any sort of problem at the ballot box and that illegal votes are being cast. And yet it seems after every election these days, we now hear, well, yeah, you know, there were 20 illegal votes cast in Michigan, and there were 6,000 illegal people registered to vote in New Jersey. And there are problems, but we don't actually have to address them or fix them. We'll just say they happened and then move on. And if we're lucky, people will forget. This story in Politico from late last week, it's the honor system. New Jersey's non-citizen voter registration brings private worries into the open. Maybe you're not as conspiratorial as you think. There are even those on the left, Democrats in New Jersey, who say, we've got a problem here. And they tried to address it. In May, a bipartisan duo introduced a piece of legislation that would add one sentence to the state's automatic voter registration law to make sure someone who indicates they are not a U.S. citizen won't be prompted to register to vote. Now, you would think this would be simple and brainless and obvious to pass. If you say, I'm not a U.S. citizen, you should then not be prompted to say, would you like to vote? That shouldn't be an option. In New Jersey, as we just talked about, more than 6,000 non-citizens added to the state's voter rolls, and around 400 of them cast votes, the governor said. And here's the piece you should have your ears open to. Politico, of all places, reporting that revelation, 6,000 non-citizens added to the state's voter rolls, 400 voting, exposed an open secret about New Jersey's so-called motor voter law that officials and political operatives have known for years. They've known it for years. They just haven't told you about it. There is little in New Jersey, and you can bet in other states, to stop non-citizens from registering to vote if they want to, or even by mistake. And election officials and campaign consultants from both parties believe the number of non-citizens being added to the voter rolls is significantly higher than 6,000 because the state has been automatically registering drivers since 2018. That 6,000 figure covers only June 2023 to June 2024. So you've got roughly, quick math, 8 additional years. If there were 6,000 in 1 year and you've got 8 additional years, again, quick math, that's what, 48,000 perhaps non-citizens registered? And who knows how many of those voted over that time? It's an honor system, said a county board of elections administrator. Unclear how many non-citizens have registered to vote in New Jersey beyond the 1 year period that Cheryl cited, the governor there. Trump administration estimated 35,000. New Jersey political insiders don't know if that's true, but they're certain it's more then 6,600. The presumption is that people slipped through the cracks, said one Democratic political operative. You're not crazy. It happens. Both parties know about it, and they simply don't care enough about it to fix it. Certainly the Democrats who run New Jersey don't. And some Republicans who refuse to support the SAVE Act in the Senate might be placed in the same category. While we're in the Northeast and talking about voting, this cut went crazy yesterday over on X and elsewhere. You may have seen or heard it, but we'll play it for those who missed it. Zohran Mamdani, I think this is actually from a press conference from last week, and it just got sort of clipped recently. He has proposed these city-owned grocery stores. And a question as they were rolling them out, essentially, I think the question's on this clip, but how will you make sure people aren't hoarding the food and then reselling it for more than the markdown price? Listen to Zohran Mamdani and then what he does. I'll make a point here in a second. This is Zohran Mamdani and another city official talking about the city-owned grocery stores, the soon-to-come grocery stores in New York City. Cut 14.
How are you going to keep people from taking advantage of that, that deal, basically? And is there going to be a limit on the number of items that someone can take that are discounted at that level from that essential basket?
So our RFP makes very clear that this is a program for New Yorkers to be able to put food on the table, not a program for people to be able to make a quick buck through reselling. I'm going to pass it over to our EDC head, Jeannie Pack, to add some additional details.
Yes, if you look at our RFP for the operator, we are looking to make sure that we target New Yorkers, whether it be at sort of a library card-esque, and also we manage who's buying, and that is focused on everyday New Yorkers. So we are mindful of that, and so we're going to make sure that we have all the things in place to ensure.
Hold on there. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? A library type card, an ID card. This is Jim Crow 3.0 coming to New York City, but it's worse because it's not just voting, it's food. Restricting your access to food if you can't show an ID in New York City. More on Daybreak next. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Thanks so much for joining us on this election day in some parts of the country, including right here in Michigan, where I sit. We've got a preview coming up later on in the program, the U.S. Senate Democratic primary. By the way, the Republicans here in Michigan, John James, likely to win the Michigan Republican gubernatorial nod. He's running against Perry Johnson today. There's still a primary fight there. Mike Rogers is the slam dunk shoo-in on the Senate side. He'll be a very strong candidate no matter who emerges on the Democratic side of that race. I got to tell you that Mamdani cut. There's something else you got to. From a political perspective, did Mamdani himself say that they were going to force photo ID on people who wanted to buy food at these New York City-owned grocery stores? No, he did not. He forced a subordinate to replace him at the lectern to say the thing. He didn't say the thing that might be used in campaign ads against him. He had a subordinate say, well, we're going to be using a library card type ID system to see who's buying food. Politically savvy on his part. I will at least give him that. But they don't hear the words they're said. They don't hear them. They don't hear themselves say, yes, we're going to require you to have photo ID to buy food in the city at the city-owned grocery stores, but not to vote. We care to know who you are when you buy lettuce and apples and bananas so we can track you and know what you've purchased and if you're reselling it on the secondary market. But, yeah, you want to come in and vote? Just promise us you're legal and promise us that you're not a non citizen. Things will be okay. Jim Crow 3.0 in New York City. Never thought you'd see the day, right? This portion of Daybreak brought to you by Longevity. Did you know more than 90% of Americans don't get enough essential vitamins and minerals from food alone? And if you're in New York City, you might be denied access if you don't have a photo ID. Some research suggests natural vitamins may be superior to synthetic ones. Longevity is an excellent source of more than 20 natural vitamins and minerals from real food sources, not synthetic. Longevity is a complete nutritional support that gives you everything you need to age well. Go to longevitywellness.co, enter the code Gruber at checkout for a special discount. That's longevitywellness.co. Enter the code Gruber at checkout for a special discount for Longevity Wellness. Lucas Weber from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty joins us in just a few minutes here on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Thanks so much for joining us on this Tuesday morning. Whole lot of energy to start the day, get you up and going. Election day in some parts of the country, including in Michigan, Washington State, Missouri, Virginia, a few other places. Next Tuesday is Election Day in the state of Wisconsin. And what's happening on the Democratic side of the gubernatorial primary there is one they'll be writing about for some time. A socialist candidate currently leads the race. There have been attempts to figure out how to stop that from happening, and it's not been successful so far. That's put some complications into what's happening there. Lucas Weber joins us. He's deputy counsel at the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, will-law.org for more information. Lucas, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Give us an overview, this 20,000-foot view of what's been happening in the Democratic primary for governor in Wisconsin. Lots of twists and turns up in the Badger State.
Yeah, no doubt. It's been a very competitive primary. There were a number of candidates who got into the race. As you said, there's one of those Democratic socialists who's currently the front runner and has been for some time now. I think the more, we'll call them establishment party members, have been trying to rally behind a candidate. There's a number of candidates that they've kind of bounced between. Several of those candidates, though, have dropped out. I mean, we had first our largest city, Milwaukee, is also the largest county in Wisconsin, and the county executive, the kind of executive of that county, was in the race, David Crowley. He originally dropped out and endorsed the lieutenant governor, Sarah Rodriguez. Sarah Rodriguez had a number of campaign finance issues, and she dropped out of the race. This is all, after early voting had begun. She now dropped out of the race. David Crowley then got back into the race. He was endorsed by the sitting governor. The former lieutenant governor, Mandela Barnes, recently dropped out of the race. So there's just been a number of major candidates who have dropped out of the race after voting. Early voting has begun here in Wisconsin, and next Tuesday is our in-person election day. But there's been a number of these candidates who've gotten in, out, and then at least one has gotten back in, and that's David Crowley. So just really a wild, bizarre race here in Wisconsin.
And this is where the legal question seeps in and where Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty steps in because, as you mentioned, both absentee and early voting is underway in Wisconsin as two major candidates. I mean, not single-digit candidates, double-digit support candidates, Sarah Rodriguez and Mandela Barnes, drop out of the race. And so you have Democrats who are asking essentially for do-overs for all these people who returned early ballots in this race. This has gone to court. I know there was a hearing last week. Explain a bit about what the argument is for a redo and where we are in this process.
Yeah, so a lawsuit was brought by several voters who had already cast their mail-in vote for one of the candidates. I think they all said they had voted for Sarah Rodriguez, the current lieutenant governor who dropped out. Wisconsin, like many states, offers early voting, either in mail-in voting for about a month and a half prior to elections. It's a very long period of time. There are obviously trade-offs to that. Some people like early voting, but if you vote really early and your candidate drops out, then, you're kind of out of luck. Wisconsin law doesn't allow you to get a do-over vote simply because your candidate has dropped out or you changed your mind on who you want to vote for. But in this case, three voters who voted for Sarah Rodriguez brought a lawsuit in Dane County, Wisconsin, which is where Madison is located. They challenged a directive from the Wisconsin Elections Commission, which was a bipartisan commission that issued this, that said you can't get that do-over vote. But the court heard all arguments on it and issued a decision last week that it was not going to stop that guidance, so it was not going to allow them to do the revote. And again, that just makes a lot of sense from not only an election integrity standpoint, but just from a common sense and public policy standpoint. I mean, the thought of, the 100,000 early voters in Wisconsin getting a do-over would certainly wreak havoc on our election and our municipal clerks all around the state.
Is that the end? Is that court ruling the end? Is there a higher authority that the plaintiffs can appeal to in this case?
They could appeal. They have not, as of right now, filed that appeal. And I wouldn't expect them to. With the election happening next Tuesday, it seems unlikely that they'd be able to get the relief that they seek here. And, I don't know where they go from here. Technically, the lawsuit would still be alive. This was just a preliminary ruling in the lawsuit. They had sought an injunction at the front end. But, the case will continue, but it won't have any impact on this election cycle for sure.
Lucas Weber with us, Deputy Counsel at the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, will-law.org. How do other states, I don't know if you looked into this as part of your filing, how do other states handle this sort of situation? Here in Michigan, I believe the law allows you to request a spoiled ballot. We had the situation with Mallory McMorrow, who dropped out after votes were beginning to be cast in the Michigan Democratic Senate primary. How do other states handle the situation?
We haven't looked into how other states all do it. Wisconsin law does allow you to get a new ballot for things like if you damage your ballot or
Hmm.
if you mark the wrong candidate while you still have your ballot, you can bring your ballot back to the clerk and get a new one. The only thing is, once you actually turn your ballot in, once you return your ballot to the clerk, you don't get a do over at that point. So.
Do you think that this will continue to be a live question in Wisconsin and theoretically in other states as well? Because early voting, despite my opinion that it's not good for our democracy and not good for, I like the idea of everyone voting the same day with the same information. That doesn't happen anymore. And I fought with political scientists of the past who always would say, look, no, these are just people who are hardcore. They're never going to change their minds. Don't worry about it. And of course, now we have situations where people are changing their minds all the time and new information drops and scandals happen 2 weeks before election day and allegations. Anyway, will this continue to be a live question as we continue to have 6 weeks of early voting in some states around the country? And how do you think will this always be decided on a state by state basis?
Yeah, I mean, I think I haven't seen Congress express much interest in getting involved in this. So yeah, I think this will probably vary state by state, and I do think it's going to continue to be an issue. You noted some of the public policy concerns with this massive early voting period. I mean, look, I get it. People can go out of town, things come up. Absentee voting has a purpose, and I certainly understand that. But when you're allowing this kind of month and a half of early voting, this kind of stuff is going to keep coming up. I mean, things change, people change their minds. But again, it's just an election integrity issue. Every time you have a new ballot issued out there, it just creates issues, chain of custody issues, and making sure that our votes are secure. So, I do think this will continue to repeat itself. It's probably going to be tried out elsewhere around the country. I hope nobody else has the kind of crazy primary election that we've had here in Wisconsin because it's been a lot, but you never know.
Lucas Weber, I do wonder, you don't have to comment, what it would take for people to rethink early voting. And if we look at the results in Wisconsin come next week and Rodriguez plus Barnes, their vote total is equal to the difference between Crowley and Hong. There's going to be questions about, well, maybe this isn't such a great idea. Maybe we wait until much closer to election day to allow people to early vote. Just the weekend before, just the few days before. I don't know. We'll see. Lucas Weber, Deputy Counsel at the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. That's will-law.org. He's on X at LT Weber with a V. Lucas, thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Scott Bertram sitting in. We'll talk with Kurt Maselli coming up next on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy today. Find me on X at Scott Bertram, SCOTBERTRAM, scottbertram.com. Always pleased and privileged to be here, sitting in when Steve and Ivy are away. They're back on Monday. Kurt Maselli is with us now. He's Chief Medical Officer for an organization called Do No Harm, a medical watchdog group, and he's going to tell us more about the organization and what they've been doing here right now. Dr. Kurt Maselli, thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
Thank you for having me, Scott.
Hey, outline for us what Do No Harm is all about.
Absolutely. So we are an organization of over 50,000 members, and that's healthcare professionals, concerned citizens, and policymakers that are really focused on getting identity politics out of medicine and keeping kids safe from radical gender ideology. And that is our focus, the heart and soul of medicine. Let's focus on quality and good patient care and not ideology.
How far have we come in this fight? Because every day you see a little bit of this and a little veering this way in terms of where we are as a culture and how much people are aware of exactly what's happening out there and where some of this money is going. How would you describe the path that we've taken here? I know you testified in front of Congress last year as well on the topic.
Absolutely. It's been a long road, but these are things in healthcare that have been there for decades and decades in the making. And I think, unfortunately, we've seen sort of this radicalization with this focus on identity politics, with removing merit and excellence, and unfortunately putting, again, identity politics at the forefront. But we are making strides. We see an administration that is focused on merit, focused on excellence, and especially in healthcare. This is where, of any industry, it really matters and is absolutely essential that we have the best and brightest physicians, the best and brightest nurses, pharmacists, and healthcare providers who are supporting people throughout this country. And so we continue to make inroads, we continue to advance, but unfortunately, there's a great tide, and we have to continue this quest in terms of putting excellence and merit first. It's about patients. And I think when we focus on patients, when we focus on them as individuals, as opposed to members of an identity group, when we focus on the individual, we're going to do what's right for them. We're going to provide the very best in care. And that's what anyone would expect from medicine. And that's what we need to do.
Kurt Maselli with us. He's Chief Medical Officer of Do No Harm. Kurt, this phrase, gender affirming care, it's difficult, or it's tough to language police people, but it seems like such an obfuscation of what actually happens. And when normal people hear the phrase gender affirming care, they kind of think, well, that sounds all right. Nothing wrong with that. Is it a challenge to explain to people what's wrong and why perhaps we should not be pursuing what some call gender affirming care?
You're absolutely right. The language does matter, and I think it's important for us to really understand these procedures when we're thinking of kids, that these are sex rejecting procedures. These are procedures, and again, these are children that are confused, that are struggling through puberty or through other parts of their young adolescence as they're growing up and being confused about their gender, or having influences from social media, or just struggling with other issues that concern their mental health, whether depression or anxiety. And we need to recognize that and help support them through those issues and not inflict these sex rejecting procedures upon them. And so, this includes puberty blockers, it includes cross-sex hormones, it includes surgeries. And unfortunately, within the medical community, the organizations like the American Medical Association, even at its most recent annual meeting, has continued to support this gender affirming care for kids, and that's a big problem. So you're absolutely right. The language that we use is essential, and it's important to recognize these procedures for what they are. There's much we can do for these kids in terms of providing them the appropriate psychological help to help them through their depression, their anxiety, their struggle, to recognize the ills of social media in terms of the influence that it has, and again, not put these kids on a pathway to medicalization that unfortunately is so harmful and has been so detrimental. My organization, Do No Harm, we've looked at the data. We've looked at claims data specifically from 2019 to 2023, and we saw over 5,700 surgeries on children related to these sex-rejecting procedures. And that's nearly 14,000 kids who either received some sort of surgery or hormone or the like. So this is a significant challenge, and we've got to really focus it head on. And again, the administration has done that. Many states have done that with, I think we have upwards of 27 states now that have issued some degree of ban on these procedures for minors. And unfortunately, These medical associations need to come along as well. They need to recognize our ethical obligation as physicians, as caregivers, and truly need to follow in line with the evidence. Because again, when you look at the data, when you look at the systematic reviews, these interventions on kids are not helpful to them, and certainly putting on this pathway of medicalization leads to such irreversible harm. We've got to understand what is truly going on psychologically with these children and help them in the right ways, not hurt them with these radical procedures.
Kurt Maselli from Do No Harm here on Daybreak. Kurt, I know that Do No Harm has sent a letter recently to 10 major medical societies urging them to reject these surgeries on minors. Who got these letters? Any response as of yet?
Yeah, so we just sent these letters out last week, and we sent them to organizations like the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Endocrine Society, the American Psychiatric Association. We sent them to these organizations, which have issued position statements or guidelines or policy statements that unfortunately are in favor of the full course of gender affirming care. And what we're looking at here is we're looking at, again, none of these interventions, whether it's puberty blockers, hormones, or surgeries, should be performed on kids, but especially genital surgeries. I mean, when we look at data from our database, as well as other data that one could look at in the Journal of the American Medical Association, or even reports by Reuters, there's still hundreds of these procedures that involve genital surgeries. And this is castration, hysterectomy. I mean, these are significant procedures that are life altering for these individuals. And we are calling upon these medical societies to recognize that this is something that should never be done to a child. We look forward to the response from these societies. We look forward to them, again, looking at the data, looking at the evidence, and looking at the ethics behind making sure that we have the interest of the individual at heart, that we look at doing no harm and effectively leading by our values. And we hope that these organizations will see such light. The American Society of Plastic Surgeons has been a leader in recognizing the professional
Kurt,
ethics
we're
and
against the
values.
clock. I apologize. Dr. Kurt Maselli with us. DoNoHarmMedicine.org for more information there. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram sitting in this Tuesday morning, Election Day here in Michigan, and a few other places across the country. We'll have more on that throughout the program. Big Democratic U.S. Senate primary here between the socialist Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens, the congresswoman, though Stevens says she'll endorse El-Sayed if he wins and campaign for his platform. And well, so maybe there's not much of a difference there whatsoever anyway. This portion of the Steve Gruber Show and Daybreak brought to you by Ghost Bed. Summer is in full swing. It's August. The dog days are around the corner. Maybe by now you've experienced that it's too hot all night. Can't rest. People blame that heat for bad sleep. It could be the mattress, though, trapping that heat. If you already sleep hot, summer just makes it worse. That's why Ghost Bed exists. It helps keep you cool all night long. You won't wake up sweaty and tossing and turning. Hot sleepers are Ghost Bed's happiest customers. You can read the reviews and see it. Incredible support from the bed with less stiffness, deeper sleep, and more rested mornings, which after all is what you want. Ghost Bed gives you 101 nights to try this out at home. Sleep the rest of the summer, even into the fall, and feel the difference for yourself. Ghost Bed currently having a sale for the Steve Gruber and Daybreak audience at extra 10% off. With financing, some Ghost Beds come out to around $1 a day, and that's not so much to pay for a tremendous night of sleep. Ghostbed.com/Gruber. That's ghostbed.com/Gruber. Use the promo code Gruber to check out Ghost Bed for yourself. And remember, 101 nights to try it at home. I mentioned it's getting to the end of summer. Yesterday, the big manila envelope arrived from school with letters for the kids. They were so excited. Well, they were semi-excited about heading back to school. I like getting it because I'm an organized person. And so I just like seeing the list of stuff you got to buy for school and then shopping, checking it off the list, getting things done. Do we have what we need? Are we ready to go? That gets me excited. And Mom is semi-excited about the fact that the kids are going back to school. She loves the kids, but you know, after 3 months, well, 2.5 months or so with them, maybe a few days of school a week is going to be okay. Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy here on Daybreak.
America's awake, and we're just getting started. The headlines that matter, the stories they won't tell you, and the voices fighting to be heard. This is your country, your morning, your daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. A new hour starts right now on Real America's Voice.
Live from the campus of Hillsdale College in beautiful Hillsdale, Michigan, this is Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy this morning on Daybreak. It's Tuesday, August 4th, 2026, a gorgeous election day here in Michigan and in a few other states across the country. Welcome to it. Thanks for joining us. Here are three big things you need to know. 1, Maryland lawmakers have kicked off a special session there to consider a first step in a partisan redistricting initiative that could help Democrats pick up an additional U.S. House seat by 2028. The General Assembly there debating a proposed constitutional amendment that would give Democrats the ability to draw themselves one more seat favoring their party. They already have 7 of 8 in the state, trying to shut out Republicans entirely in Maryland. The plan would have to get by voters first. 2, a new executive order aimed at helping military families is now in effect. At a White House ceremony yesterday, President Trump said the order establishes the President's Military Spouse Commission, which would consult with the President on issues that affect military spouses and families. Those issues include childcare, employment, housing, and health care. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth's wife will chair that commission. And number 3, Senate Republicans have taken a key step to prevent a government shutdown almost 2 months before a deadline. That's weird and unusual. The upper chamber voted in a bipartisan wave to clear the first procedural hurdle for a short-term funding extension that would see government open through the midterm and into early December. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer endorsed the CR, arguing the current bipartisan plan was the responsible path forward. Okay. That's how we start hour 2 here on Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram sitting in today and through the rest of the week. Steve and Ivy back with you on Monday after a little summer break. I'm here on the campus of Hillsdale College. As I mentioned when I guest host, I speak only on behalf of myself, not on behalf of the college, though I do work here. I'm the general manager of our award-winning student radio station, WRFH, also a lecturer in journalism. And I don't know if we'll get to that today or tomorrow, but I need to talk about journalism at Hillsdale and journalism elsewhere in the country, like at Columbia Journalism School. Made an interesting decision yesterday. I'm also the director of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network, which you can find where you find your audio podcasts or over at podcast.hillsdale.edu. We have a primary election here in Michigan. We'll preview it a bit next hour if you stick with us. We'll also recap tomorrow because one race, the primary on the Democrat side for U.S. Senate, is going to have some reverberations across the country. Will it be socialist Abdul El-Sayed? And in the interest of being transparent, but El-Sayed says he's not a socialist. He's not a DSA member. Now, he hangs out with all the DSA members. He is endorsed by socialists. He basically has the same platform. I think it's okay to call him what he clearly is. You can see it with your own eyes. And Haley Stevens, who people will say is a moderate and a centrist. But as we've pointed out multiple times, as I've guest hosted here, she is smack dab in the middle of the liberal Democratic Party. She is not in the middle of the political spectrum. She is in the middle of the liberal Democratic Party. And she's already committed to supporting El-Sayed if he wins. So, are they pretty much the same anyway? We'll see what voters say throughout the day today as they head to the polls in Michigan. Results, of course, later on tonight. We'll break that down tomorrow with you. Who was breaking it down yesterday? President Trump. In a press conference following the announcement of that military spouse program, President Trump was asked about this U.S. Senate race unfolding here in Michigan. Here's what the president said. This is cut 16.
Well, you have a very interesting group. Who I really voted for is Mike Rogers, because I think he's going to be a great senator. but you have a communist versus a socialist. That's the way I look at it. You have a communist versus a socialist. It looks like the communist is leading. We're talking about for the Democrat primary. But for the Republican, you have a very good man, and he should be able to win. Yeah.
Mike Rogers is a great candidate and one perfectly positioned to take advantage of El Said if he wins. As President Trump said, the communist in the race. Mike Rogers is a guy who nearly knocked off a much stronger candidate in Alyssa Slotkin last cycle. He's back at it this cycle. He is palatable to a wide range of voters in Michigan, including conservatives and center-right Republicans and centrists in the state. I think he can beat El Said. I would prefer that El Said is not one race away from being in the U.S. Senate. That's my preference. Haley Stevens might be a tougher candidate to defeat for Mike Rogers, but I would prefer that the communist socialist El Said is not one step away from the U.S. Senate. Speaking of socialists, in Wisconsin, and we're going to talk about this later in the week because Wisconsin's primary is next Tuesday. They have a socialist in Francesca Hong who is leading the polls by a significant margin at this point. Tom Tiffany is the Republican in Wisconsin running for governor. And Francesca Hong has posted a lot and tweeted a lot over the years. And people have noticed that she hates major holidays like Thanksgiving. In fact, she tweeted, "Cancel Thanksgiving. Should have done this in 1621. If it takes a worldwide pandemic for us to realize we should stop celebrating colonialism and the original super spreader event that killed indigenous folks and women, so be it." So she tweets, "Cancel Thanksgiving." Francesca Hong's on CNN last night, and she is asked, "Will you cancel Thanksgiving?" A normal person says, "No, I will not." Francesca Hong is not a normal person. She's a socialist. Listen to her response here. Cut 19.
I'm a chef, and one of the first meals that I made that was for the community when I was 16 was a Thanksgiving meal. You know, I always think my hospitality background in owning a restaurant for 7-8 years, that bringing folks around the table to share conversation and build community is always a good thing. But Thanksgiving is also a time that's incredibly painful for many people in our communities. And so I think I wanted to make sure that people understood that there are multiple views, but views can evolve. And the position that I'm running for right now, and I think my background as a chef, will actually help me become a better governor that's able to bring more people to the table.
Francesca Hong, thank you for joining us.
Worthy word salad from Francesca Hong. What didn't she say? What didn't she say? She didn't say, "No, I won't cancel Thanksgiving." She said, "It's incredibly painful." Now, I know families can be tough to deal with, but I don't know if I'd call it incredibly painful. She didn't say, "No, I won't cancel Thanksgiving." Just say no. She hates other holidays. She does not enjoy fireworks, hates the 4th of July. She complained that an IT bro working on our computer remotely changed the background theme to snow and Christmas trees. She feels slightly attacked. Doesn't like Christmas. Hates Valentine's Day. As if we weren't invisible enough to those who didn't recognize the emotional and physical labor of service work, the worst of humanity comes from folks celebrating on another day capitalism tells you how to show love. Hates Thanksgiving, hates 4th of July, hates Christmas, wants to cancel Thanksgiving. That's the show socialist candidate for governor in Wisconsin, soon to be the Democratic nominee. More next on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram sitting in for both of them this morning, this great Tuesday morning all across the country. Becky Dummermuth is with us right now. She's Senior Counsel for First Liberty Institute. More at firstliberty.org. Becky, thanks so much for joining us here this morning on Daybreak.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate the time. People can find an op-ed co-written by you or written by you over at The Hill. Union helps employer persecute its own members, then finds out. This involves Alaska Airlines in a case dragging back a couple of years. What happened here? What are the facts of the case?
Well, back in February 2021, so this is when we were coming out of COVID and after Black Lives Matter protests, Alaska Airlines posted an article on their internal communication network saying that they supported the Equality Act. Now, this is something that was just visible to employees, but the article talked about the Equality Act, and that was legislation that Congress was considering at the time that would have really expanded civil rights protections. It would have removed protections of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and opened up private spaces to anybody. Like women's spaces would no longer be able to be just for women. So Alaska posted that support. Then they invited comments and questions from their employees. And the two flight attendants who are our clients posted in response very respectful questions. The first, Lacey Smith, said, "Do you believe as a company that you can regulate morality?" And then the second, Marley Brown, spent a lot of the day researching the Equality Act and just praying about what God would have her do. And by the end of the day, thought she was supposed to raise some concerns as well. So she started out by asking if Alaska believed in the suppression of the church because of the concerns about religious freedom, and then just raised concern about the safety of women and girls in their private spaces, and ended up by saying that giving people access to these spaces could enable predators to exploit the rules and harm these people. After that, the company, go ahead.
I was going to say, and for that, what happened?
They were pulled from their lines, they were investigated, and ultimately fired, both of them. Being told that their comments were hateful, discriminatory, offensive.
Now, theoretically, a union exists to protect their members from actions like this by the company, by the corporation, in this case, Alaska Airlines. So you would expect the union to jump in on behalf of these employees, on behalf of the union members, and fight for them and fight on their behalf. That didn't happen here, did it?
No, it definitely didn't. In fact, shortly after both of them posted, the union president was in contact with leadership in the company asking if they'd seen the posts. He eventually ended up reviewing the response that the airline initially gave to Lacey. And then over time, there was, internal discussion in the union where they were referring to these women as bigots and pukes. The union president asked why people had so much trouble uniting their faith with inclusivity. There were just a lot. I guess probably the worst comment was the woman who eventually ended up representing Marley in her investigation with the company. She posted, "Can somebody turn off the comments or just put Marley and Lacey in a burlap bag and drop them in a well?" I mean, that's just amazing that this is the woman who later ended up supposedly defending Marley.
Mm-hmm. How did they find out about those comments? I assume there's some discovery as a lawsuit proceeds, but did they have concerns? Did they think that the union might be actively working against them as this case unfolded?
Well, both of them found that the union didn't support when they raised their religious freedom concerns. It said you can't discriminate against me on the basis of religion. Marley faced a lot of more overt hostility where they were telling her, no, don't ask for a religious accommodation. Don't raise religion at this meeting. It won't go well for you if you raise it. But yes, a lot of those comments came out in discovery as we were asking for information from the other side. Just kind of got worse and worse as we looked more into the record.
Becky Dummermuth is with us, Senior Counsel for First Liberty Institute at firstliberty.org. And it's a reminder, too, that civil rights don't stop when you accept a job. They don't stop when you're a member of a union. those protections exist for a reason. And First Liberty says, well, if the union's not going to help protect you, First Liberty will step in and do that job.
Mm-hmm. It's been such a privilege to support these women. But I also think that this case is a great reminder to unions that Title VII applies to them too. So Title VII is the civil rights protections that tells employers that they can't discriminate in the workplace on race, color, religion, sex, national origin. And those apply to the unions too. So the unions can't discriminate or try to cause the employer to discriminate or acquiesce in discrimination. And those are the concerns here.
I'm asking you to crystal ball a bit here, but do you think this is perhaps more widespread than we might think if employees aren't sort of seeing these activities that are happening behind the scenes? They might not be aware that some of this discrimination is happening. Is this religious discrimination perhaps more widespread than we might think?
Well, from the people that we've talked to, it seems that a lot of them are aware of hostility to the religious beliefs from the unions that they're dealing with, and they're frustrated because they think that they should be protected in the workplace and not have the unions going along with the cancel culture. So this case is a great wake-up call to say, no, this is a problem. Unions can't act this way.
And there are so many places where you don't have a choice. If you want the job, you've got to join the union. And then you at least expect some basic level of service representation. That's doubly, triply frustrating when this is the outcome of the union help in this case. Becky Dummermuth is Senior Counsel for First Liberty Institute. You can find more at firstliberty.org. Her op-ed also over at The Hill as well. Becky, thanks so much for joining us here this morning on Daybreak.
Thank you for having me. It was good to talk to you, Scott.
Appreciate it. Scott Bertrand filling in for Steve and Ivy. Chris Farrell from Judicial Watch in just about 8 minutes or so. Preview the Michigan U.S. Senate primary coming up in hour 3, so stick with us here on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber here on this Tuesday morning. Thanks so much for joining us. Happy to be here. Scott Bertram filling in. Find me on X at Scott Bertram, SCOTBERTRAM, or scottbertram.com. I was so pleased to see this. Old Glory Bank, Steve's been telling you about Old Glory Bank here, and just happenstance, I guess. Mike Ring, who is the president and CEO of Old Glory Bank, was here on Hillsdale's campus. I think it was just last year, last fall, last spring, one of the two terms in last academic year. I got a chance to meet him and spend a little bit of time with him. He gave an interview to one of our student journalists here at our award-winning radio station, WRFH. Did a tremendous job. Actually drove him around campus a little bit. Couldn't have been nicer. He's a Air Force guy. I think spent 4 years in the Air Force, and then helps now with Old Glory Bank as president and CEO. So I actually know someone who's working and helping Old Glory Bank execute their mission. America, built by communities that believe in hard work, integrity, taking care of one another. That's how Old Glory Bank got its start. More than 120 years ago, Old Glory Bank began as a community bank in Oklahoma. Today, the same foundation serves tens of thousands of customers across all 50 states through secure online banking while holding fast to the values that form its roots. Old Glory Bank believes banking should be personal. They provide real customer service from real Americans while delivering modern banking tools for individuals, families, and businesses. They're also preparing for the future by expanding into innovative financial technology, all while remaining committed to privacy, security, and financial liberty. Remember when banking was built on trust? It still is at OGB, Old Glory Bank. Visit oldglorybank.com/RAV today. That's oldglorybank.com/RAV. And if you happen to see or talk to Mike Ring, tell him that I said hi. I haven't seen him since he was here on campus. oldglorybank.com/RAV. Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy this morning here on Daybreak. Stick around. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram filling in on this Tuesday morning. Thanks so much for being alongside. Steve and Ivy off all week. Mark your calendars. I'm here. Stick around. Steve and Ivy back on Monday. Got a very busy week of news to cover, of course. Primary elections in a few states today, including here in Michigan, where I sit. But Chris Farrell joins us right now. He's Director of Investigations and Research with Judicial Watch. You can find more at judicialwatch.org. Chris, thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
Good morning, Scott. Great to be with you.
Good to talk. Hey, I remember seeing this headline over at the New York Post last month. Egyptian terror group claimed responsibility for downing TWA Flight 800 off Long Island in 1996. New FBI records reveal. It's one of those things you sort of see and you say, oh, that's curious. That's interesting. And I kind of frankly forgot about it for a while. So it's good I get the chance to talk about it with you today. There's a new documentary that Judicial Watch has helped produce that outlines this case and outlines what you've discovered. First, for people who might have forgotten or just don't remember, what was this TWA Flight 800? This is July of 1996. So we're going back 30 years now. Right. I remember it happening. Many, of course, remember it happening. Tell us what happened, the circumstances. Describe for us about TWA Flight 800.
Sure, happy to do so. And it is important 30 years later because there's never been a good answer or explanation for why the plane exploded in midair off the coast of Long Island that night on July 17th, 1996. And 230 souls were lost. It's not in the living memory of half of America, right? It's 30 years ago. So it's essentially ancient history. It happened at a time where the internet was brand new. There was no such thing as social media or crowdsourcing or any of the other kind of techniques that you see that are such a basic part of American life now. So this disaster happens, and it's really inexplicable. Trans World Airlines at the time was just as big as what we now think of as, Delta, United, American. It was one of the big American airlines flying internationally. A 747, which at the time was the biggest aircraft in the air, is on its way from New York to Paris. It's the evening of the 17th of July, 1996. The aircraft that just left JFK was about 13 minutes into its flight, about 8 miles off the south coast of Long Island at about 13,000 feet. And suddenly it explodes, breaks in half, and crashes into the water. The first thing that happens is rather than the National Transportation Safety Board beginning the investigation, the FBI comes in and kind of Bigfoots NTSB and says, we're going to do this. They don't really have the skill set required. They rely on the NTSB, but FBI kind of runs the show. There's two schools of thought initially. One is, of course, mechanical failure. Something bad happened on the plane. The other was some kind of a bomb or missile. These are obvious things to think of. Pan Am 103 had been lost a few years earlier. There have been other instances of airline bombings. Very famously, just the year before, a plot to blow up 11 aircraft over the Pacific had been broken up in Manila, Philippines. This is 3 years after the first World Trade Center bombing. So we're talking about an environment where there's a lot of terrorism, there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of effort to blow up planes. And so naturally, it seems like that could be one of the causes. Sure. Very quickly, the FBI says, whoop, it's mechanical failure. The problem is there are 270 eyewitnesses who watched a rocket or missile come off the surface, off the horizon, rise to join, and then explode the aircraft. Of those 270 witnesses, 70 some odd have excruciatingly detailed, very precise recollection and descriptions. When the NTSB does its big report explaining what happened to the aircraft, how many of those eyewitnesses do you think, how many of their testimony were in the report?
Well, I'm cheating a bit. I believe I know the answer is 0. Is that correct?
0. Not a single one. Instead, the NTSB came up with a spark of unknown origin that they believe was a wire in the center fuel tank of the aircraft. Never before and never since has any 747 blown up that way. When it did blow up, do you think 747s were grounded and they were all inspected and checked out? No.
You would think they would be, but they were not. Yeah.
Not a single one. TWA Flight 800, the next day, New York to Paris, with a 747 flew the same route. So we did a lot of work and went back over 30 years of testimony, a lot of the exhibits and the details that were produced as a result of this. We went and analyzed with a physicist, a guy named Dr. Tom Stelkup, a brilliant guy. We looked at the radar data because one of the advantages of analyzing radar data is radar data doesn't worry about its next promotion or its retirement package, right? Radar data is just radar data. And the New York Radar Control Center shows an object moving at 1,200 knots, unidentified, no IFF transponder identifying what it is. 1,200 knots, flies up off the surface and joins TW-800, and then they both disappear. Normally, you would say that that would be a missile or a rocket of some description. No, there's no discussion of that. There's no discussion of a debris trail 1.5 miles streaming to the right rear of the aircraft, which is the opposite point of where the impact would have taken place at the left front of the aircraft. No discussion of the Suffolk County coroner coming up with bodies that were loaded, embedded with metallic objects that were not part of the plane's fuselage or construction. So there's a lot of problems with how the NTSB and the FBI conducted this inspection. There's a lot of reasons why they would have tried to suppress this information.
Yeah, let me
But I
ask that,
think
'cause
most
we got about 90 seconds, and I want to ask that. So
Sure.
Chris Farrell with us, Judicial Watch, judicialwatch.org for the documentary and more. The why question. So the
Right.
facts from Cairo claiming credit, radar,
Correct.
eyewitnesses. So what's your best explanation as to why investigators would simply overlook or not include this information?
I believe there's political pressure out of the Clinton White House. The reason I say that is because the Olympics were about to start 3 days later. Half the world was traveling to Atlanta for the Olympics. The Clinton administration had just gone through a very rough period of both international and domestic terror. The Oklahoma City bombing, Khobar Tower bombing, the first attack on the World Trade Center, et cetera, et cetera. They were walking up to an election that coming fall, right? About 2.5, 3 months later, there's going to be an election. And they didn't want to have another 230 dead people off the coast of Long Island based upon their inability to secure U.S. airspace. And I think the pivotal thing is our investigation uncovered never before reported FBI documents where they acknowledged that they had received terror claims from Cairo. And no one has ever identified or reported that ever before.
Chris Farrell, judicialwatch.org. He's Director of Investigations and Research. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Scott.
It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber here on this Tuesday morning all across this great country of ours. Thanks so much for joining us. Dr. Andrew Fox is our next guest, an organizational culture expert, professor, priest, author of the upcoming book, Truth in the Age of Applause, How Stupidity is Ruining the American Dream. Find him on X at Dr. Andrew Fox. It's Dr. Andrew Fox. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here this morning.
The book and the topics inside and the discussion inside is useful as we begin to see what happens today in Michigan, what happens next week in Wisconsin with Abdul El-Sayed, with Francesca Hong, and other socialists who are running under the Democratic platform, and the rise of the DSA in politics. Something I've talked about is, and even Democrats have discussed this too, is whether or not these DSA candidates, these socialists, want to reform the Democratic Party or, in fact, replace the Democratic Party, sort of using the husk of the old party to birth a new DSA here in the U.S. What do you think the end goal is?
I do think there's going to emerge a third party. I think all signs are indicating that. But the constituents that will, I think, form that third party, the people voting for these, if you'll pardon me, monster raving lunatics that bring socialism, is a politically homeless people. They're neither Republican or Democrat. The Republicans have let them down. The Democrats have let them down. These are mostly the children of millennials, but there's a scattering of others as well throughout the different generations. But they are politically homeless. And like anyone homeless, you know, they'll do anything for just a bite to eat, figuratively speaking. It's like watching sea lions clap for fish. You know, you get the zookeeper come out with a bucket of fish, and he or she will get these wonderful creatures to, you know, do backflips and everything just to get a fish. That's what's happening to put these socialists into power.
How have they so quickly become a dominant voice on the left? I mean, I don't know who's in charge of the Democratic Party right now. Maybe it's Gavin Newsom. Maybe it's Kamala Harris. I guess we'll find out in 2028, you know, the presidential nominee. But in terms of messaging and platform, it's all being pushed by the farthest left and the socialists with the loud voice. How did that happen so quickly?
Well, like you say, when there's no one at the helm, who knows where the ship's going to sail? But that's the subtitle of my book, How Stupidity is Ruining the American Dream. And you can tell by my accent, I wasn't born here. I was born in Great Britain. I came in on a visa, became a permanent resident, and then I became a citizen. So I've been through the whole system 26 years ago. I'm still trying to talk American, but I'm still stuck with this British accent. But stupidity is defined as Dietrich Bonhoeffer defined it in the Second World War. He was a Lutheran theologian, and he went up against the cultural flow of that day, or the ideology, which was the Third Reich. He said to the German people, he said, look, you're not stupid in the traditional sense. You're stupid in this sense. You are smart, you're intelligent, you're rational, you're logical, you're reasonable, but you're abdicating your God-given moral thought and judgment just to go along with the ideology. And we see that happening in the United States today. That's what's putting these people into power. And I'm not saying it's a Fourth Reich. What I'm saying is smart, rational, intelligent, logical, reasonable people are being stupid, as Bonhoeffer described it, by abdicating on pause for a moment and think about what you've been told. Like the governor of New York wanting to change the name mother to gestating parent. That's the biggest insult to women with a uterus yet. Never mind men trying to be women in sports, women's sports. It's an insult. And then you've got Mandami, who wants to bring these grocery stores to New York, where prices will not go up for a period of 5 years. Even a fourth grade student will tell you that's not sustainable. And so it all falls under this umbrella of stupidity by abdicating, not thinking, not pausing, pondering, mulling it over in your mind and asking questions, having discussions of what does this mean? How will it be funded? And what is the end game? So we see a lot of this happening. And, my rallying call is to pause and think, stop and ponder on what you are being told and ask the right questions.
Dr. Andrew Fox with us, his forthcoming book, Truth in the Age of Applause, How Stupidity is Ruining the American Dream. You can find him on X at Dr. Andrew Fox. Part of the book examines how this desire for acceptance and affirmation is so important. Is that why the socialist platform and these ideas are so appealing? Because they essentially tell people it's not your fault. Not only is it not your fault, but there's nothing you can do anyway because the deck is stacked against you and you're okay just the way you are. We'll take care of you. Is that why it's so appealing?
I think so. And I think the underlining score is the applause. We've all been to a concert, no matter what kind of concert it is. And there's a song that we like, and there's a particular line in that song that we like. And as it's sung, everybody applauds. Now, for 50%, they know why they're applauding, but the other 50%, they just go along with it. We saw this in the World Cup, FIFA World Cup, where 48 nations came to the United States. The media in foreign countries had said America is a bad place, a dangerous place. Our media, mainstream media, is just as bad. But when these 48 nations got here, what they found was a wonderful, hospitable, wonderful people. Every Uber driver, every waitress became an ambassador for the United States. And individuals that were not funded, they weren't sponsored, they posted on social media how great America was. What a wonderful place to be. The food, the AC, the free refills, the ice that you get in your drink.
The ice,
so much.
yes.
Yeah, the simple things of life. And so we have to say, why are the media giving the socialists such a big platform when what's coming out of their mouth is nothing short of stupidity, as I've defined? It's unsustainable promises that they're making to a politically harmless
Dr.
people.
Andrew Fox, the upcoming book is Truth in the Age of Applause. Thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
PFAS are
It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Big day in politics, Election Day in Michigan and a few other states. Big sports day yesterday, Major League Baseball trade deadline. Brock has that and more in sports.
With a look at sports, I'm Brock Palmbush. It was Major League Baseball trade deadline day yesterday, and there were some notable moves. The Philadelphia Phillies got three-time batting champ Luis Arias from the San Francisco Giants for a pair of minor leaguers. The Boston Red Sox got all-star catcher Adley Rutschman from the Baltimore Orioles for a handful of prospects. And the Cleveland Guardians made a couple of separate moves, getting starting pitcher Foster Griffin from Washington and outfielder Joe Adell from the LA Angels. 8 games in Major League Baseball last night. American League winners were Tampa Bay and Toronto. National League winners were Philadelphia, St. Louis, Pittsburgh, the Chicago Cubs, Arizona, and San Francisco. In the WNBA last night, there were 3 games. Winners were Las Vegas, New York, and Phoenix. And the U.S. Soccer Federation agreed to a new 4-year deal with men's national team coach Mauricio Pochettino. He led the United States to the round of 16 in the World Cup earlier this summer. That's a look at sports. Back to you, Scott.
Thanks, Brock. Notice you didn't mention my White Sox, picking up catcher Joey Bart from the Atlanta Braves yesterday. Might not be the difference, but they've had the worst production in baseball from the catcher's position, so maybe they'll
Sorry about that, Scott.
That's okay. Brock apologizing in my ear. It's okay. It's okay. One other quick sports note: Major League Soccer. We talked about this yesterday in Montreal. The Montreal crowd shouting "Death to Israel" after a Jewish player scored 2 goals against the Montreal squad, and I said, shouldn't the Major League Soccer look into this, police some of what's happening inside the league? Apparently, there is an investigation ongoing. We'll see what happens with that. But man, there's some crazy anti-Semitic stuff happening in Montreal, and it includes at sporting events there too. This portion of Daybreak brought to you by QE, a red light therapy wand. If you deal with knee pain, joint pain, stiffness, especially when driving or sitting for long stretches, listen to this. You can't take a medical treatment bed with you on the road, but you can keep the QE red light therapy wand right in your glove box. It uses red and infrared light, handheld, combined with proprietary quantum energy technology to target pain right where it hurts. No pills, no appointments, just simple targeted relief you can use anytime. Go to ExodusStrong.com/Gruber. That's ExodusStrong.com/Gruber. Get it for less than $100. Use the promo code Gruber. ExodusStrong.com/Gruber.
There's this place.
America's awake, and we're just getting started. The headlines that matter, the stories they won't tell you, and the voices fighting to be heard. This is your country, your morning, your daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. A new hour starts right now.
Live from the campus of Hillsdale College in beautiful Hillsdale, Michigan, this is Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy here on Daybreak on this Tuesday, August 4th, Election Day here in Michigan and in a few other states around the country. It's a beautiful day to cast a vote here in the Wolverine State and maybe where you are too. Here are three big things you need to know. One, a man suspected of starting one of the massive wildfires threatening Spokane, Washington, will be in court today. Aaron Farinacci was arrested by a SWAT team after a witness said he saw him acting suspiciously near where one of the fires started on Saturday. The 37-year-old Spokane resident being held on $1 million bond. He's got a past criminal record in Arizona, including a manslaughter conviction for killing his father in Mesa back in 2010. 2. As I mentioned, voters heading to the polls today for another big primary election day across America. Ballots being cast in Michigan, Missouri, Kansas, Virginia, and Washington state. The Democratic U.S. Senate primary here in Michigan, the main event. Socialist Abdul El-Sayed against Congresswoman Haley Stevens. We'll preview that and other Michigan topics this hour with Tim Golding from Americans for Prosperity and Jason Cable Rowe, political and communications strategist, also occasional Detroit News op-ed writer as well. That's coming up later on this hour. And number 3, the White House gathering leaders from major artificial intelligence companies to discuss a new cybersecurity review program for advanced AI systems today. Representatives from OpenAI, Google, and Anthropic are expected to take part in talks on a voluntary framework that would allow the government to test powerful AI models for potential security risks before release. That is where we start hour 3 of Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram filling in this morning. Find me on X at Scott Bertram, SCOTBERTRAM. Also, scottbertram.com, where I corral all my media doings, including hosting shows like the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, heard on many fine radio stations across the country, also available in podcast form. I host one called Political Beats, a show about music with guests from the world of politics over at National Review and elsewhere. We have our own Patreon page, patreon.com/politicalbeats. I got lots of other stuff out there too. Find me at scottbertram.com. Longtime fill-in host for Steve. Pleased and privileged to be here throughout the week as Steve and Ivy return on Monday. It is Election Day here in the state of Michigan. There are a number of races we will talk about with our guests later this hour. The Ann Arbor mayoral race is interesting. Some congressional races across the state are interesting on the primary side. But the big one is the U.S. Senate race among Democrats, or among a Democrat and a socialist. Abdul El-Sayed, who again says he's not a socialist, but is backed by all the socialists and has DSA support and AOC and Bernie Sanders, and his platform is indistinguishable from the socialist platform. You understand. Abdul El-Sayed, the polls say, will win today. Again, my card's on the table. I would prefer a Haley Stevens win, even if it might be harder for Mike Rogers to win in the general. I don't want someone like Abdul El-Sayed one step away from the U.S. Senate. Now, the polls say it doesn't matter. He's apparently going to win. We'll see what the votes say by the end of the day. Of course, polling notoriously recently has not been great, not just here in Michigan, but just about everywhere. Mike Rogers is the Republican candidate for Senate in Michigan. He nearly defeated Alyssa Slotkin a couple of years ago in the last cycle. Slotkin's a much stronger candidate than either Stevens or El-Sayed. And Rogers is, I don't want to say uniquely positioned, but very well positioned to take advantage of any liabilities in El-Sayed's campaign in a general election. He is a Republican. He is one that is palatable for conservatives, one that is palatable for right-of-center voters, and one that should be palatable for most moderate, centrist kind of voters in this purple state of Michigan. Mike Rogers on over the weekend on Fox News asked to weigh in on this current head-to-head matchup on the Democratic side between Haley Stevens and Abdul El-Sayed. This is Mike Rogers on Fox News, cut 11.
The crazy train has arrived in Michigan. They've got Bernie Sanders throwing the coal in the boiler, and they've got AOC, the engineer, and these two candidates are on board. I mean, they are bringing every crazy leftist idea to Michigan, and they forgot about working people here. And so, yes, I absolutely, when you look at the fact that she supported EV mandates, that she supports men and women's sports, and they both do this, by the way. They supported all of that green raw deal that gave us a loss in manufacturing in this state and high prices. There isn't much difference, again, other than Abdul brings a little bit of different crazy to the table. And he's more dangerous, I think, just because he is so anti-Semitic. It's spreading around the state with his, I think, pretty harmful rhetoric. And so, yeah, I mean, they're both the same. The Democrats are lining up behind this new Democrat Socialists of America. And I just don't believe working families in Michigan are gonna stand for this. I think they're going to come out, either stay home or they're going to vote for us. And that's why we're doing well with independents as well.
That's Mike Rogers on Fox News over the weekend. He will be a strong candidate and a definite potential flip of a U.S. Senate seat in Michigan come November, no matter who wins the Democratic primary today. We'll talk about it with Tim Golding in a few minutes, and also with Jason Cable-Rowe later on this hour. I wanted to make sure we played this cut because it's fun. Dr. Anthony Fauci thoroughly embarrassed in front of Congress, and Rand Paul taking the fifth, 111 times, I think the count was, as he was asked questions, the science, Tony Fauci. Aaron Rodgers, quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, was interrogated week after week. Did you take the vaccine? What about the vaccine? Can you play? Are you vaccinated? What about your teammates? And he was a little frustrated about that. So Aaron Rodgers, now back for a final year with the Pittsburgh Steelers, was interviewed yesterday on ESPN on Pat McAfee's show, and decided to have a little fun and poke at Anthony Fauci while he's down, which I don't necessarily have a problem with. Aaron Rodgers yesterday, ESPN, cut number 18.
Tony Fauci is an absolute criminal.
Can you tell us about the mindset of coming into your last season? Like, that's a real thing, it feels like, because is everything better? Is everything funner? Is everything more awesome? Like, how do you kind of view this year versus maybe the years of the past?
I'm going to plead the fifth.
Okay.
That's a smart move.
Okay.
Like
Gotta
that.
love that guy.
Okay. Like that absolute coward, Tony Fauci. Absolute coward.
Yeah.
There, it's back, baby. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, 111
You
times.
got a pardon and you're in front and you pleaded over 100 times at the White House? What are you scared of, Tony?
Yeah.
I thought you were the science.
Yeah.
I thought you were I am science, and you get up there and you can't answer a question?
Yeah.
What are we doing? And how much time did the network spend at that? How much time did they spend on my responses every week, on my vaccination status, on Taylor and Travis's wedding? Did they do even a minute? Did they do even a minute on Tony Fauci?
No, I don't think I've heard anything.
All right, there's Aaron Rodgers yesterday having some fun with Anthony Fauci. Also some media criticism from the quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And you hear the crowd go wild in the background as well. More on what's happening across Michigan today at the ballot box next with Tim Golding from Americans for Prosperity. Scott Bertram here on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber, digging back into the world of music history as we do when I guest host. Birthdays, death days, number ones on this day, and more. Well, Prince, not the artist formerly known as, but at this point he was still just Prince. Number one on the album charts. Started on this day back in 1984 with the Purple Rain soundtrack. It stayed there for 24 weeks. Now, I think my math is correct. That's about half a year. Not bad. Moving some units, as they say. Prince and the Purple Rain soundtrack topped the charts on this day in 1984, just 42 years ago. Joined now by Tim Golding. He's Michigan State Director for Americans for Prosperity. Tim, thanks so much for joining us this morning on Daybreak.
For having me, Scott.
Big election day today across the state of Michigan. Is it too obvious a question to ask what you're most looking forward to seeing today when the ballots are cast?
Well, yeah, as far as the Senate race goes, I think Abdul would be an easy target to defeat in November, but having him on a ballot scares the living daylights out of me, because if he did get elected, what new fresh hell that would rain down on our country and our state. So Haley Stevens would be more moderate. She's still a progressive, though. I mean, if you look at her response during COVID, the auto bailouts, EV mandates, all the things that they want to do to increase the size and scope of the government, she'd be just as bad. They're going to get to the same spot. They just use different pathways to get there. And hopefully the easier target makes it through.
There are real big questions here about the future of the Democratic Party, both on a statewide basis and a national basis. Thus far, for the most part, these DSA candidates, the socialist candidates running under the Democratic banner, have been in these deep blue districts where there's no Republican candidate down the road, and you can vote for whoever you want because there are no consequences. There's no one that's going to be a formidable general election candidate. That, of course, is different now in Michigan, where you have Mike Rogers, a rock-ribbed kind of conservative kind of guy on the Republican side of the ticket. If Democrats now say, we don't necessarily care as much about competitiveness as being someone who is going to upend the system, what does that portend for other races around the country?
It's scary, to be honest with you. I can't understand how people could vote for this Democrat socialist agenda. And again, it used to be in the real blue states, but it's not. It's going all over the place, and it's like an infection. It's a cancer. It's poison that kills everything it touches as it relates to how we're supposed to operate as a country. They are totally 180 degrees opposite of our founding principles and how our government is supposed to operate. I mean, they want to increase government control in every aspect of our lives. And the population that's getting behind these people are, quite frankly, the downward mobile, middle-aged white people who got degrees that they couldn't pay for and got debt that they can't pay off with jobs that don't exist, and they're angry and they're mad and they think the government owes them something. And that's just not the reality. The DSA platform, they want to get rid of the Senate. They want to change the presidency. They want to have the government run everything. And that's just not how our country is supposed to operate. And people need to start standing up and listening to the rational minds, the conservative voices, when they point out that these people are antithetical to America. They hate America. They fundamentally want to change it. And by the way, you don't fundamentally change something that you love. These people do not love America, and we cannot let them get elected.
Tim Golding with us. He's Michigan State Director for Americans for Prosperity. Scott Bertram filling in here on Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Pocketbook issues. The economy always is at the top of voters' minds. Affordability is the catchphrase, the key word as we head toward November. Do Republicans and conservatives still have an effective, efficient argument on the economy, on affordability that will work as we head toward November?
Absolutely. Mike Rogers, his policy, what he's been talking about for years and months in this campaign is bringing down the cost of energy, for example, getting rid of some of our changing how we permit energy projects, changing where and how we can put new infrastructure in. His plans for energy reform are going to be earth-changing. We need energy of abundance from all sources, and he wants that. He doesn't want to have EV mandates and green energy mandates would only increase costs to consumers and ratepayers. He wants to free up the market so that we can be energy independent. He wants to change how our education system works, especially in Michigan. Under the Democratic leadership, we've gone from like top 20 to 45th in the nation. A third of the third graders can do math at proficient levels. A quarter of the fourth graders can read at a proficient level. Every metric in Michigan is pointing us in the wrong direction. It's because of Democratic control. So when Americans hear the Republicans' plan for bringing down the cost of living so people can buy bacon and eggs, not just one or the other, and where we can have reliable, cost-effective energy, they're much more on board with that, at least the swing voters that we talk to every day, than the Democrats' agenda that you can show them only increased cost. In Michigan, the Democrats passed Public Act 233 back in the fall of November 23, and since then our green energy, those green energy mandates have driven up the cost of our energy to its highest anywhere in the Midwest and the least reliable. So their solutions never work. They only increase the costs, reduce reliability, and make the government bigger than it needs to be, with less opportunities and less freedoms for Michigan families and businesses.
Tim, we got about 45 seconds left here. We'll have the gubernatorial race also begin in earnest after today as well. Jocelyn Benson, likely for Democrats. John James, likely for Republicans. Give us a little handicap on that as we head, again, toward November.
That'll be a tough fight. John James is clearly a better candidate. He has a conservative mind. He's done well in Congress. He knows how to get things done. He's a business owner. He's a veteran. He is a fighter and a worker and will be for Michigan families. And he knows how to get the job done. Again, it'll be a hard fight, but he's going to get out there and work after the primary, and I think we'll see him victorious as well come November.
Tim Golding is Michigan State Director for Americans for Prosperity, doing good work all across the state of America. Find them online at Americans for Prosperity. Tim, thanks so much for jumping on this morning and joining us here on Daybreak.
Thanks, Scott.
Scott Bertram in for Steve and Ivy. More coming up next. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram filling in on this Tuesday morning. Find me on X at Scott Bertram, SCOTBERTRAM, and scottbertram.com. This portion of the broadcast brought to you by NeuroGuard Plus. Stop concussions before they happen. Dr. Michael Hutchinson has patented a breakthrough mouth guard for athletes in every sport. It's a game changer. Athletes using NeuroGuard Plus suffer concussions just 0.26% of the time. That's almost unheard of. And it gets better. The mouthguard can boost your strength and speed up to 16%. Michigan State and Wayne State have tested it and certified the results. Protect your brain, upgrade your performance. NeuroGuardPlus.com. Save 10% with promo code Gruber. That's NeuroGuardPlus.com. And save 10% with promo code Gruber on the NeuroGuard Plus. Polling out over the weekend for these Michigan races. And again, polling has been a bit uneven and unpredictable, but it's a snapshot, or at least a data point. The Epic MRA poll in the field from July 24th through July 31st, so before the month of August began on Saturday. A matchup between Jocelyn Benson and John James has Benson +9, 47-38. The matchup between Benson and Perry Johnson as bench it up 12, 48-36. On the U.S. Senate side of things, Mike Rogers a 3-point advantage, although within the margin of error over Abdul El Sayed, 46% to 43%. Haley Stevens a 2-point lead, but again within the margin of error on Mike Rogers, 44-42 is the percentage there. Stevens up +2 on Mike Rogers. Long way to go, and the contours of the race are going to shift based on who wins the primary today. Abdul El Sayed, by the way, I saw this in the Detroit News this morning, yesterday said it's, quote, inevitable that he will defeat Mike Rogers by 7 points in November. He's calling his shot. He's never won anything. He's not won the primary yet, but he says it's inevitable he'll beat Mike Rogers by 7 points in November. We will see about that. Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy on this morning's Daybreak.
Sometimes it's hard to be a woman.
It's the Steve Gruber Show and Daybreak. Scott Bertram filling in on Daybreak on this Tuesday morning. On this day back in 2015, Billy Sherrill passed away. Billy Sherrill co-wrote this song, Stand By Your Man, Tammy Wynette. Of course, the first time I heard the song was in the Blues Brothers, performed by Jake and Elwood in the film as they were at Bob's Country Bunker. Sherrill also one of the ones who invented the countrypolitan sound of country music. Very influential. Billy Sherrill died on this day in 2015 at the age of 78 years old. Scott Bertram in for Steve and Ivy here on Daybreak this morning. We welcome in John Leake. He's the author of Mind Viruses, America's Irrational Obsessions, just released a couple of weeks ago. Find it at Amazon.com and elsewhere. John, thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
Having me. The first time I heard Stand By Your Man was also at Bob's Country Bunker in the Blues Brothers. That was a great film. Yeah. I guess that dates us.
A little bit. I always say this about the Blues Brothers. It's not the best movie ever made, but I have seen it more than I've seen any other movie ever produced. I've watched the Blues Brothers more than any other movie that's out there. So I can pretty much quote chapter and verse. You got to play both kinds, country and Western. And so I think that's probably a little more Western. Stand by your man.
It's a great place, Bob. We're the Blues Brothers, good old boys.
Boys band, yes. All right, John. Mind Viruses, America's Irrational Obsessions. You wrote a book previously, The Courage to Face COVID-19. That's a little timely now, too, if people want to go back and check it out. What's the new one about? America's Irrational Obsessions. How do you define that, and what has America been hung up on?
Well, have you noticed since around 2001 that the country seems to be beset with some moral panic or national security crisis, or it could be gender dysphoria one year, and the year after Barack Obama was elected president, suddenly we're all a racist country. We just didn't realize that. We thought we'd put Jim Crow segregation behind us, but turns out we're suffering from systemic racism, and then it's climate change. Suddenly the world is going to burn up and end because of human-induced climate change. And then we have COVID-19. My goodness, we have a respiratory viral pandemic emanating out of Wuhan. So, I worked with Dr. Peter McCullough on 2 books about the COVID pandemic. And it was really within that context that I began to think, it's always something, isn't it? Something is always coming for us in this country. And I began to notice a pattern, a sort of script that is being played out with each of these panics, which we can talk about if you're interested.
Yeah, Rosanna Dana said that too. It's always something. I wonder about this. When I look at news coverage of I want to say panics or obsessions like this, something I notice is there's rarely follow-up, meaning be scared about this. We're going to frighten you. It's terrible. Something has to be done. But then the something never happens, and there's never any reporting. There's never any, backward looking as to say, oh, this is what we got wrong, or here's how we fix this thing, or this is why you shouldn't worry about it anymore.
Well, something is done. Congress usually appropriates a vast amount of money to shovel into somebody's pocket who's purportedly in the business of providing some kind of a dubious solution or so-called countermeasure. So that's part of the script. Panic, emergency funding. We look at a perfect model of this was the CARES Act of March 26, 2020. Kind of almost overnight, Congress, drafts this legislation. How are we going to respond to this boogeyman that's just come out of China? And so with the stroke of a keyboard, with the CARES Act, Congress created $2.2 trillion just out of thin air. I mean, that was 10% of U.S. GDP, and that money was dispersed across hospital systems, PCR testing labs, COVID-19 vaccine makers and purveyors, just vast amounts of federal money. And a lot of it is just stolen. There's an enormous amount of fraud. And then we're told, well, the vaccine is the solution and everybody has to get the shot. That's the other element that I examine in the book. The purported solution is often framed as a kind of savior of mankind. If we don't agree to this, we're all going to die. But yes, there's no real follow-up on, well, was the solution really the thing that saved us? Or, perhaps we would have been just fine, on our own without a bunch of government intervention. So as the reader will see as he reads the book, this pattern becomes clearer and clearer. And then what happens is, as we, the people, and I do have an underlying political philosophy in this, going back to James Madison, the author of the Constitution, the state has increasingly adopted this attitude that we, the people, constantly need to be saved by the central state. And this really isn't what our founding fathers had in mind when they framed the republic. So what happens is we, the people, or at least some segment of we, the people, start to wise up, realize what's going on here. But before we are able to make any real advances in terms of addressing the malfeasance and the fraud, another crisis comes and hits, terrifies everybody or distracts everybody about some new crisis. And then we're not able to do any accounting of the last one. So what I argue in the book is, if you read the book, I think you'll begin to see the pattern. You will become very adept at spotting this pattern. The face of the threats is constantly changing, but the script stays the same. And what I'm hoping, my objective in writing the book, is that more people can be, to use a metaphor, immunized against these mind viruses that keep being unleashed on us.
John Lake, author of Mind Viruses, America's Irrational Obsessions. We got about 60 seconds left here. You say critical thinking is replaced by mindless slogans, extreme either-or propositions. This is the pass it or people will die. They always go back to that. Pass cares or people will die. Vaccine or people will die. Net neutrality or people will die. Why is that effective? Why can't we more clearly see through an argument like that?
Propagandists long ago, and I trace the history of modern propaganda going back to the First World War, and they've figured out how to tap into our archaic brain back when we were small tribes, living on the veldt, threatened by saber-toothed tigers and neighboring tribes. We are easily frightened. We are mortal. I don't dismiss the fact that the human being is mortal and vulnerable. So propagandists have figured out how to hijack that archaic fear. And, I argue, we need to recognize this like anthropologists and learn to overcome this. Part of being a grown-up, particularly a man, is not just to freak out all the time.
Yeah. John Leake is the author of Mind Viruses, America's Irrational Obsessions, out now. Find it at Amazon.com and elsewhere. Also, noted Blues Brothers fan as well. John, thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
Thank you.
More on Michigan's election today with Jason Cable Rowe next here on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram sitting in on this Tuesday morning, going back into the world of music history. Number one on this day back in 1985, 41 years ago today, Tears for Fears got their emotions all the way to the surface with Shout. Number one on this day back in 1985. We'll see who's shouting later on tonight when the ballots are counted and we see who wins the primaries across the state of Michigan. Here to preview a bit with us is Jason Cable Rowe, political and communications strategist. You can find him at JC Rowe, R-O-E, on X, RoweStrategic.LLC. If you're in the Detroit area, he's on WDIV tonight, Local 4, doing some election analysis from 9 to 11 p.m. Jason, thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
Hey, thanks for having me, Scott. Great throwback with the Tears for Fears.
Yeah, it doesn't seem quite that long ago, but, time is undefeated. We keep moving forward. Jason, the top line race, even the president weighing in on this yesterday, saying Mike Rogers is his guy, which is no surprise whatsoever, but he thinks Mike Rogers is in a good position to win no matter who wins this Democratic primary tonight. Abdul El-Sayed says it's inevitable. He's going to win by 7 points in November. He hasn't even won the primary yet. What happened? I mean, take these past 6 months of the Democratic campaign into about 60 seconds or so. How did Democrats get to the point where they are about to nominate a socialist for the U.S. Senate seat?
Yeah, I don't think it's that the Democratic Party just, en masse became socialists. I think it's that the socialist candidates have been the most aggressive in wanting to attack President Trump and Republicans in Congress. So I think this is more a product of style, not substance. And, Haley Stevens is a 4-term congresswoman. So by definition, she's part of the establishment. She is backed by everyone in the establishment, from Chuck Schumer to Gretchen Whitmer to retiring Senator Gary Stevens, whose seat they are running for. So, to me, it's just, that's where the energy is. Democrats are angry. They hate President Trump. And whoever can be, I would say, the most pugilistic in their approach is going to capture their imaginations. And so I think El-Sayed is going to win comfortably tonight.
Do you agree with the conventional wisdom that Mike Rogers will have an easier time dispatching of Abdul El-Sayed than he would of Haley Stevens?
I certainly felt that early on, but as I've watched the Stevens campaign, I'm not particularly intimidated by her either. I think, in 52 years, Republicans have won one Senate race in the state of Michigan, and that was in 1994 when we had the Gingrich Revolution. We only held that for one term. So even when the state was very red, with Republicans controlling all of the statewide constitutional offices, both chambers of the legislature, the congressional delegation, the state Supreme Court, we still didn't have either one of those Senate seats. So it's always been a little bit elusive. But Rogers was handicapped in the 2024 race. He did have a primary up until about a month left when Sandy Pensler dropped out, but he had to spend a lot of money in that primary process. And he was running against Alyssa Slotkin, who is one of the best fundraisers in the Democratic Party. She started, TV ads a year before his primary. So he was playing catch up. He was using soft money, which spends about 30 cents on the dollar compared to candidate money. And he got outspent $52 million to $13 million. That was a 4-to-1 funding disparity, and only lost by 19,000 votes. That is less than a percentage point. I think it ended up being 0.3 of a percentage point. Neither Abdul El-Sayed or Haley Stevens is as formidable a candidate as Alyssa Slotkin. And when you look at the narrows of that race, you can see that Mike is very well positioned. Without a primary, he's been able to sock money away. He's been able to travel the state, and he's been able to hold Abdul and Haley's coats while they kick the crap out of each other. So I think the Democratic Party is going to be deeply split tomorrow morning, and I don't know in the next 90 days they can put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
Jason Cable Rowe with us, previewing today's Michigan races. The gubernatorial general election can begin in earnest tomorrow. Very likely to be Jocelyn Benson and John James. Where is Jocelyn Benson most vulnerable on the issues, or where is she most vulnerable?
Yeah. Well, you got to remember, she's never had a well funded Republican opponent. And so people don't realize, the general public doesn't realize how progressive she is. I mean, her CV is a progressive's wet dream, but nobody's ever really exploited that. And I think when you have, assuming El Sayed does win, El Sayed at the top of the ticket, Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, who is a socialist and DSA backed candidate, running for Secretary of State. For Attorney General, you have Ellie Savitt, the Washtenaw County prosecutor, who's backed by George Soros. He wants to end cash bail, decriminalize sex work and narcotics, just far out of the mainstream platform. You put all those people together, this is the most progressive slate of candidates Michigan voters will have ever seen in their lives. And I would say probably in the entire country, we will be fielding one of the most progressive slates of candidates. And so I think that Benson hasn't gotten the colonoscopy that she deserves going into a general election. I think whether it's John James or Perry Johnson, I do think it'll be John, but Perry is doing a lot of spending and John doesn't have a ton of money. So it's hard to keep up and you never know what might happen there. But I just think she's far more progressive than her reputation. And I think Republicans, for the first time in several elections, have nominated really good, qualified, likable, normal candidates. And so I think the contrast for Michigan voters in November is a slate full of progressive weirdos and a bunch of normal, qualified people that can restore some order and some progress in the state of Michigan. So I think it's an easy contrast to make, and I think a great opportunity for Republicans in this state.
There could be another progressive weirdo who wins in Michigan's 7th congressional district as well. It's Tom Barrett's seat around Lansing. That's a potential hold opportunity for Republicans there. We're out of time to discuss that one. We'll watch results of Michigan 7 tonight, too. Jason Cable Rowe, find him on X at JCRowe, R-O-E, RoweStrategic.LLC. Watch him tonight, 9 to 11, local 4 WDIV in Detroit. Jason, great analysis. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
Appreciate it. That's Jason Cable Rowe. Back to wrap up hour 3 of Daybreak in just a moment. Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. They're off all week. I'm here. Thanks for being alongside. Scott Bertram filling in. You can find me on X at Scott Bertram, SCOTBERTRAM, or over at scottbertram.com, where I corral all my media doings, host various podcasts and fill-in shows. I write occasionally, not as much as I used to. I'd like to get back to it. We were in the middle of doing Wasn't That Special, the SNL podcast for a couple of years. That took a lot of time, but I'd like to do some writing again. Thanks to our guests on today's program, Lucas Weber, way back hour one with the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, Kurt Maselli, 2 in hour one, Becky Dummermuth from First Liberty Institute, Chris Farrell from Judicial Watch, Dr. Andrew Fox, then hour 3, Tim Golding from Americans for Prosperity, John Leake, and Jason Cable Rowe. Man, that's a lot of stuff. And we didn't get to all of it. I'm still holding audio over for tomorrow, so please do come back. It's Election Day across Michigan. Vote if you haven't already. It's not a command, but it is, you want to be a good citizen? Go exercise that right. I'll be heading out there in just a couple of minutes. Usually I'm among the first 15, 20 voters at my precinct. I don't know if that will be the case today, but we shall see. Tomorrow's program, they're always good shows. I rarely promote a day ahead, but there's so much good stuff tomorrow. So please come back tomorrow. My friend Dominic Green is writing about what's happening in Spain, and he's going to join us hour 1. Dominic Green writing for Wall Street Journal and elsewhere. Caitlin Buss from the Detroit News will join us to review and analyze what happens across Michigan tonight in these elections. Bethany Mandel has a great essay on Brandon Gill, the congressman from Texas, who has been so good in those Q&As in hearings in Washington. We'll talk with Bethany Mandel about that. And I need to carve a little bit of time tomorrow to talk about the Columbia Journalism School and the 2 esteemed journalists that they've invited to be a part of their program this coming year. I want to contrast that a little bit with how we handle journalism here at Hillsdale College, where I am, in fact, a lecturer in journalism. I'm actually teaching our students about journalism and helping them here with their audio. We'll talk about that tomorrow. So, big day today, up late perhaps for election results, and then back with you tomorrow. Can't wait for it. Thank you so much for joining me today here on Daybreak.